Hello friends, and welcome once again to our channel on the great saints. And we've been taking a little look at the life of Saint Francis of Paolo, who was considered by so many people to have been one of the most prolific miracle workers of all time. And like with Padre Pio in his day, miracles were commonplace. And some of these miracles, as we saw, were totally unbelievable. Even from his conception, from the moment of his conception, we see how God already elected him by locations at the age of 13 and how his spirituality developed in such a hidden way. And Professor Mattei tells us that he was a special saint in a century of stagnation preceding the Protestant Revolution, the Protestant Revolt, and it would have been an alternative, God presenting his alternative. So that's how he puts it, and we can see from these miracles that God is with us all the time, even today. And we're going to see two miracles. One is a tragic miracle today, and the other is a stupefying miracle witnessed by many, many people. So do stay with us. When 5 years were now up, there were some hunters in the forest chasing a goat through the forest, and this goat escaped. He ran into his cave, jumped right into Francis of Paolo's arms, and took refuge there. And Francis saw this as a sign that the world now needs him. So he returned to the life out there on the farm. Soon had a small band of penitent hermits set up, and they practiced rigorous spiritual exercises. And the numbers in this little community grew. So soon they had to build a monastery. No sooner had they started building than another friar arrived. This one was of the Friars Minor. He's wearing the Franciscan habit. He appeared there and asked why they're building a monastery with such small dimensions, such limited monastery. Francis explained to him, well, that's all we have the means for. There's budget constraints. And the friar responded, have faith in providence. Demolish what you have built and build a far larger building according to the plan that I will now show you. And after this, he traced out on the ground a much, much bigger monastery. And there, in front of their eyes, this friar just suddenly disappeared. Perhaps it was an angel, perhaps St. Francis himself. And a few days later, a very wealthy baron of Belmont arrived, and he offered to all the material and all the money they needed for this much larger design. So they could proceed now building the monastery. There were so many miracles associated with the construction of this monastery. Let's just take a look at a few. There was this massive rock that was right in the way on the grounds in the monastery. They couldn't move it no matter how many people, no matter how hard they tried. Francis came up, blessed the rock, and then shortly after that, with a small team, they rolled the rock right out of the way. Another time, a huge rock came rolling down the hillside. It was going to demolish what they were constructing and kill many of the workers. Seeing this, Francis, once again, he blessed the rock and just stopped dead in its tracks. At another time, the workers on a monastery, they were pretty hungry, they were famished. They saw this little lamb running past, and so they went and they caught the lamb, they slaughtered it, and they cooked it over the fire. And then they disposed of everything, bones and the skin they threw into the furnace. Well, not long after that, Francis of Paolo arrived, wanting to know where his little lamb Martinello was. And they told him actually Martinello no longer exists, and the evidence is in the furnace. And so Francis walked over to the furnace, he looked inside, and then he called out, Martinello, come out. And out jumped that little lamb. It was untouched, it was bleating away, very happy to see its master. Obviously it had its life restored from the bones in the skin. That's also directly from the book. But here's a tragic story. Now, Francis's sister, Brigida, had a son who was called Nicola. And Nicola had a call-in for the religious life, and he felt this call-in, he realized this, and Francis as well realized. But Brigitte stood in the way. She was adamant her son Nicola was not going to be allowed to enter the monastery. No matter how Francis tried to persuade her, he was wasting his time. And then not long after that, poor Nicola was struck with a mysterious illness. He was right on the point of death. And at this point, Brigitte came running to Francis, pleading with him to save her son. Francis' response was, "Go away. You're not worthy to be heard by God. You have provoked his anger by your stubborn opposition." She left, and shortly after that, Nicola passed away. He expired. His body was placed in a casket in the church, there to be buried. And Brigitte came, and she was pleading before the altar in tears. Francis saw her like this. And so he approached her and said, "If your son were to return to life, would you now consent to him becoming religious?" And she said, "Yes, if heaven wants it." And so shortly after this, just 2 minutes later, Francis returned with a son alive and well and already wearing the habit of their order. Now, just one final miracle. Perhaps this is the miracle for which St. Francis of Paolo was best known. Now, his reputation had obviously been spreading out to the areas around. He had reached Sicily, and they pleaded with him, "Please come and found monasteries here too." And so finally, Francis of Paolo was able to set off with just 2 of his companions. And they came to the shores of Italy, and 4 miles away was Sicily. They realized they needed to cross over. There was 4 miles now separating them from Sicily. And so at this point, Francis approached one of the ferry captains and asked him, "For the love of Jesus, be kind enough to transport me and my 2 companions to the Sicilian shores, just a few miles off. And I'll be glad to help you," responded the ferryman, "but just as soon as you pay me." "But dear brother, we are asking for your charity, because we actually have no money." "Well, if you have no money, I do not have a boat that will carry you." Well, not worried by this, not disturbed, the man of miracles now walked down to the shore. He knelt there and he prayed. And then after that he arose and he blessed the tide. He blessed the sea in front of him, and he spread his mantle out on the waves. And he took one corner of the mantle and he attached his staff to it like a little sail in a boat. His 2 companions climbed aboard. This is on the mantle, on the coat that he's wearing. And off they set the 4 miles across the strait to Messina. The captain, the ferry captain who had turned them down, he was unnerved and he shouted, come back, you'll help them." And he set off in pursuit after them. Well, Francis and his 2 companions arrived on the shores of Sicily in this little makeshift boat. The ferryman finally caught up. His name was Colenso, and he begged the saint for forgiveness. And that's where our story ends in Sicily. Obviously, on the return trip, they did not have the same problem of being able to find a ferryman who would give them a ride. Now, a little bit about the order of St. Francis of Paolo, just a few words. It was founded by him. It's known as the Order of the Minim Friars, and they considered themselves the least of all the faithful. And Minim implies, the word implies, living the smallest as the least, and embracing humility, simplicity, and frugality. And so this ideal of being the least was brought to us, to the world, by the greatest of miracle workers. You're also very welcome to go and enroll your Mass prayer intentions on our website, and then after that you'll be able to receive reminders of any videos we make in the future. And we do ask Padre Pio and St. Francis of Paolo to pray for us and to bless us all.